Top 3 Scariest Street Horror Stories That Will Haunt You Forever. Warning: the following story is not for the faint of heart. If you're still here, proceed with caution. This is the type of tale that should never be heard alone. Story 1. The Midnight Pedestrian. It's said that after midnight the streets feel different, alive. But there's something far more sinister lurking in the quiet corners of the night. One evening, a young man named Jason, driving home after a long shift, took a different route down a dark, quiet street. It was a shortcut he had driven countless times before, but tonight was different. Tonight the air felt too still. As he neared an old street lamp that flickered weakly in the dark, he saw him, a man standing at the end of the road in the shadows. Jason slowed his car, then stopped entirely. The man was wearing an old, tattered jacket, his face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. Jason, unsettled, stared for a moment. The man stood motionless, his presence eerily unsettling. Then the man turned his head, slowly, almost mechanically, and Jason could see it. The man's eyes weren't eyes at all. They were empty, hollow sockets staring back at him. No whites, no pupils, just deep, endless blackness. Jason's heart raced. He slammed the car into reverse, but as he did, the street seemed to stretch, growing longer, like the road itself was trying to trap him. The man started walking, slowly, towards Jason, every step dragging. As the man neared, Jason saw something that froze his blood. The man's feet didn't touch the ground. He was floating. The car's engine sputtered, but it wouldn't start. Jason looked up at the rearview mirror in desperation. He wasn't alone. The street was now filled with more shadowy figures, all floating, all coming closer, their hollow eyes burning with an impossible hunger. Jason never made it home. Story 2. The Phone Call from the Dead. On a chilly night in October, a woman named Sarah received a phone call from her deceased brother, Mark. She had just buried him 3 days earlier, a tragic car accident that shook their entire town. The phone rang at exactly 3 a.m. Sarah, groggy and disoriented, looked at the screen. It was Mark's number. Her heart skipped a beat. She hesitated but then answered. "Hello, Sarah. I'm cold." The voice was unmistakable. It was Mark's voice, but it sounded wrong, slurred, distorted, like it had been dragged through layers of static. "Mark? Is this really you? You're dead." Her voice cracked with terror. There was a long pause. Then came the reply. "They won't let me go." The line went silent for a moment, but Sarah could hear something in the background, scraping sounds, the sound of nails on metal. She could hear it closer, almost like something was scratching against the walls of her house. Her heart pounded in her chest. Then Mark spoke again. "I'm in the basement. Come help me. I'm so cold, Sarah, so cold." The phone line cut out, but the scratching noises didn't. They were real, and they were coming from the basement. Terrified, Sarah grabbed a flashlight and crept down into the basement. The air grew colder as she descended, the temperature dropping impossibly low. And then she saw it. There, lying at the foot of the stairs, was her brother's lifeless body. But his eyes were open, and they were staring straight at her. And from behind her, the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoed through the basement. Someone else was down there with her. Story 3. The Man in the Rearview Mirror. It was just another late-night drive home for Alex. He had spent the entire day at work, and now he was finally headed back to his apartment. He took the familiar streets, but tonight felt different. He couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every street lamp he passed seemed to cast longer shadows, like they were reaching for him. He kept checking the rearview mirror, but there was nothing there, nothing but the empty, dark road behind him. And then, as he passed the old cemetery at the edge of town, he saw something that made his blood run cold. In the rearview mirror, there was someone sitting in the back seat. He whipped around, his eyes wide, but the back seat was empty, just the shadows of the car. His hands began to shake. But when he looked back in the mirror, the figure was closer, inches away from him. He could make out the outline of a man wearing a pale mask, his eyes dark and sunken. His breath caught in his throat as the figure smiled, an unnatural grin that stretched wider than any human face should be able to. The man whispered, so quietly that Alex almost couldn't hear it over the roar of his racing heart. "You shouldn't have looked in the mirror." Panic surged through Alex's veins. He slammed on the brakes, swerving the car to a stop, but the figure didn't disappear. It was still there, grinning in the reflection, his smile growing wider. Alex locked the doors, but he knew it was already too late. In the mirror, the figure's smile was now his own, contorted, grotesque, as if his face had been replaced with something far worse. "And now you've heard it. You've heard the stories. You felt the fear creep up your spine, The way your heart raced as the shadows in your room seemed to grow darker, closer. But now, a part of you knows, the nightmares are real. If you've made it this far, do you feel it? That pressure in the air? The chill in your bones? It's watching you. Every shadow, every noise that's out of place, it's there. And it's waiting. Because hearing these stories, letting them seep into your mind, has made you part of them. The curse isn't over. It's just begun. Subscribe now, if you dare. Because these stories never truly end. They follow you. They haunt you. They are waiting for you. Do you hear that? Something's at your door,